Banks, airlines, supermarkets, in normal times, all of them have clear rules on how to operate competitively and fairly towards customers. But what happens in a crisis like COVID-19? Well, the man working round the clock to address that question and make sure we come back to normal once it's all over is Rod Sims, the chairman of the ACCC. He joins me live on Skype. Rod, welcome there. Now, what are the most important changes that the regulator has made?
Basically, Tiki, we're authorising a lot of conduct that allows competitors to get together to both make sure supply continues or is boosted, or to put in place hardship policies. And if I could step back, Tiki, really at a time when you've got a war or a pandemic, it's a time when you've got a common national purpose, and often coordination works better than competition. And so we're allowing competitors to get together to coordinate in various sectors, but a whole lot of sectors, I have to say, to basically make sure we've got supply and also to relieve the burden on small business and consumers.
So, I mean, when you think about supermarkets, shopping centre owners and managers, big pharma, I mean, these are very powerful companies normally. You're allowing cooperation, but not on price. Is that key to making sure when it's all over we get back to normal?
Absolutely, Tiki. So we're giving authorisation on specific terms. So it's to help supply, it's to implement common hardship policies. In the case of supermarkets, it's to implement common distancing policies in the supermarket. But we're ruling out getting together to agree price. So this is the advantage, I think, of what we're doing. It's fairly immediate. It's clear what you can and can't do. And of course, post the crisis, these authorisations can be removed so that the economy can get back to being competitive and emerge from this crisis, hopefully, somewhere as close to before, as strong as it was before.
Right. Airlines, we know Virgin Australia is under pressure. The government so far is not agreeing to bail them out. If it were allowed to go under, Rod, how easy would it be to start a new airline, particularly as I don't think international airlines, except for Air New Zealand, can actually start and finish a flight within Australia, can they, at the moment?
That's right, but you could allow foreign airlines to drop off in Brisbane, pick up in Brisbane and drop off in Sydney. That's not allowed at the moment, but you could allow that, which would provide a certain level of competition. But I think, Tiki, it would be great if we could emerge from this crisis with two full-service airlines. We don't want just one full-service airline. We don't want Qantas just facing competition from somebody who's just competing at the budget end. We really need two full-service airlines.
So what do we need? Really, what's the answer?
Well, I think that's, look, government's doing, I have to say, an amazing job. They've got so many issues coming at them over the hill. They're making announcements daily. I don't want to get in their way of considering this issue. They need to do that. I just say I think it's really important that we've got two full-service airlines. We had two full-service airlines going into this crisis for no fault of their own. There was no doubt that we were always going to have two full-service airlines prior to this crisis. For no fault of their own, they've been put in a very tricky position. I think it would be great to come out of this crisis with two full-service airlines as well.
Rod, let me ask about traditional media. Now, Nine has announced budget cost-cutting, News Corp suspending the printing of 60 regionals. Obviously, there is a lot of pain in traditional media. You've talked about a double blow of not just COVID-19, but also the continued behaviour of the digital platforms. Now, you've got a progress report in May, but nothing's happening until November. Surely the government needs to move before then, doesn't it?
Well, Tiki, there's an underlying problem with the digital platforms. As you say, they're able to get content on terms they set. And so we said that you've got to have an evening up of the bargaining position. You've got to put in place a code that governs the relationship between the digital platforms and the media companies. And that's been an issue around for some time. And when you put the code in place, you want to get it right. Of course, COVID-19 has just come out of the blue and given everybody a whack, and that's caused real problems. I think COVID probably requires pretty quick responses, and we had in our digital platforms report the idea of support for local journalism. That's something that could be thought about. I think with the code, it's important to get that right. But don't get me wrong, we understand the urgency of this. We're going to work on this as fast and as hard as we can to make sure that by May we can give a good indication of where this is up to and perhaps some indication of where it should be going. Of course, that will give the government a lot of information, and it'll be up to the government, I guess, what timetable they want to set. They set the November timetable. I think come May, it'll be up to them to decide what timetable they want post-May.
And whether to bring it forward, I see. OK, petrol prices, Rod, what's going on with our petrol prices and what can you do about it?
Well, Ticky, you know, if I buy an apple off you for $1 and sell it to somebody else for $10, I've ripped those people off, but I don't think anybody thinks that's against the law. So it's not against the law to charge excessively. What we are doing with our monitoring role is pointing out that petrol prices should have come down much faster than they have. I mean, in Adelaide, they've been around 90 cents for a couple of weeks. Sydney, they're getting down there. They're about $1.15 now. Melbourne, they're still way too high. Canberra, they're way too high. Tasmania, they're way too high. So they're coming down everywhere, Ticky, but much too slowly. So I think the petrol companies really have to understand that they're losing a lot of goodwill through their reluctance to lower prices. Their margins at the moment, in many cases, are simply obscene.
Right. Briefly on the consumer side, we're again hearing about lots of things being done in terms of deferral of interest payments and deferral of insurance and all this sort of stuff. Are you worried that in 6 months' time we're going to hit this wall of pain and consumers will be in a lot of trouble? What's the thinking being done there?
Oh, I think there's a lot of thinking going into it, Ticky. I mean, we've got a COVID-19 task force that's actually trying to help consumers out in the short term with consumer guarantee and other sorts of issues and scams and all that sort of thing. I think when we come out of this, who knows when that will be, there'll be a fairly quick snapback in many areas. I know my hairdresser will probably have a queue of people wanting to get their hair done. And I imagine a lot of others will as well. So there'll be a fairly decent pickup, I think. And I think banks will, and insurance companies and others will have a fairly common sense attitude to people who just need a bit more time to get through this. So look, there's a lot being done, Ticky, but I think there's a lot of common sense being shown. As I said, there's a good recognition when a national crisis here. It's everybody coming together, everybody thinking about the national interest, and I suspect that will still be there to help us all come out of this at the other end.
Rod Sims, I know you and your team working incredibly hard. Thank you so much for your views.